It is now time for that interview that you did yesterday with the Prime Minister, which, of course, was showing on the day that the government's widely criticised decision to scrap winter fuel payments, the centrepiece of your interview, for millions of pensioners, is going to come under fresh scrutiny when Labour Party members, in just a couple of hours, vote on whether or not to reverse it. And, as we've been saying, ministers are bracing themselves for an embarrassing defeat.
The Prime Minister has already left the conference, conveniently avoiding any potential embarrassment, some critics would say. But speaking to me after his speech in Liverpool, he remained defiant, repeatedly refusing to apologise for taking hundreds of pounds away from pensioners. In the interview, I asked him about freebies and donations. I asked him about whether he could guarantee he's going to keep the single-person council tax discount. And I also asked whether foreign aid should be cut to spend at home. Prime Minister, you mentioned that you are dedicated to providing a government service for working people. You must have mentioned working people at least 13 times in your speech. What about the people who have worked all of their lives, paid into the state, pensioners? How can you justify taking away up to £300 from those formerly working people?
Well, it's tough. And I think the first thing to say is, and to explain, is why we had to do it. We inherited a really damaged economy. We did an audit and we discovered an undisclosed £22 billion black hole this year, which we have to fix.
That black hole includes public sector pay rises.
Well, the last government set up the pay review bodies for the public sector. It knew that they would come back with about £9 billion worth of recommendations. Some of those recommendations came back and the government put them on the desk and didn't deal with them. They ran away.
Okay.
But they allocated 0 pence towards that settlement. That is not the way to run the economy.
Why
so
do
I'm not going to accept this challenge that somehow by paying that, because there's a £22 billion black hole. We have to deal with it this year because we need to stabilise the economy.
Why do pensioners have to pay, Prime Minister?
Please hear me out. If we stabilise the economy, which we're determined to do, that means that we can absolutely commit, as we do, and I do again to you this morning, we commit to the triple lock, which means that for pensioners, this year an extra £900, next year an extra £460, because I want to make sure that every pensioner is better off under Labour. But we can only do that if we stabilise the economy. At the same time, as you'd expect, we're trying to get as many pensioners as possible onto pension credit, which means the winter fuel payments is covered. And, of course, they get the pension credit, which is really important. The reason we had to do this is because of the black hole left by the previous government.
But you had choices, and you chose to do it. You didn't have to do it, you chose to do it.
£22 billion of money is a huge amount to find in a year.
Yeah.
But by leaving it, not doing it, in my view, we ran the risk of losing control of the economy. And if there's one thing which, in my view, has hit pensioners harder than anything in the last few years, it's when inflation went through the roof, because the last government lost control of the economy. I'm not going to let that happen to pensioners ever again.
I want to introduce you to Chrissy. She's a pensioner who's a regular viewer of Good Morning Britain. She has got in touch with us. She was an NHS nurse for 25 years. She's on the full state pension, which puts her just a few pounds over the threshold for pension credit.
Yep.
She's about to lose her winter fuel allowance. She has arthritis. She estimates her fuel bills are about to go up by £40 a month this winter, and she is dreading it because she does not feel she's going to be able to put the heating on. She voted for you, but she feels let down. Would you like to take this opportunity to say sorry to pensioners like Chrissy?
Well, I am really concerned that we've been put in this position. When you inherit an economy with £22 billion missing, it is a really difficult set of choices. But what I don't want to do is to allow the economy to run out of control. What I want to make sure is that every single pensioner there is that increase through the triple lock each and every year, £460 next year because of the triple lock. We have to take that action, but I also have to fix the NHS. And talking to pensioners, so many of them want the NHS to work properly because they're dependent on it.
I just want to stick with this point about pensioners like Chrissy. And I asked you, would you like to take this opportunity to say sorry to voters who voted for you, like Chrissy, pensioners who are about to lose hundreds this winter because of your choices?
What I'd say to Chrissy is this. I absolutely promised that we would stabilise the economy to make sure we never had the economy getting out of control again. We then discovered £22 billion missing.
OK, so you've mentioned the £22 billion a couple of times. You have also pointed out the full
it is the single reason we've had to take this decision.
But I would repeat, you did have choices. The full state pension rises by, as you say, £460, April 2025. According to analysis by a former pensions minister, Steve Webb, it needs to rise by £250 just to keep up with the inflation that has eaten into what people have. So that means that the real increase for pensioners is only £210. If someone's losing £300 in winter fuel payments, they're going to be worse off, aren't they?
Well, there's no point in the last government lecturing us about inflation. We are going to stabilise the economy, make sure it's controlled, and make sure the triple lock can be kept to. But we are also going to fix the NHS.
But sorry, do you acknowledge the fact that a pensioner who gets £300 winter fuel payment and loses it is actually going to be worse off under Labour? Not, as you promised in your speech, better off.
Well, the way to deal with that is to get inflation down. The way to get inflation down is to make sure we've stabilised the economy. That is precisely why we are doing this, to make sure that the overall money coming in for pensioners is more than it otherwise would have been, and to make sure and to be clear that they'll all be better off under Labour.
Just because I've asked you a couple of times and you have just skirted round it, I did ask, would you like to take this opportunity to say sorry to the pensioners who feel hurt and less well off, certainly not better off, because you've taken away their winter fuel allowance? Would you like to say sorry?
The people who should be saying sorry are the last government who left a hole of £22 billion. And they should be sorry for that. They should apologise for that.
So you're not going to apologise?
I've come in to fix the mess, fix the problems, and that's tough, really tough decisions. The cost of not doing it is to run the risk that we lose control of the economy again. I'm not going to do that, because if I do, you will be saying to me in 2 or 3 years' time, if we lose control of the economy, will you now say sorry for having lost control of the economy? So that the apology needs to come from the last government who left such a mess, £22 billion black hole. We can't walk past it. It's a huge amount of money. And if we don't stabilise the economy, we can't keep to the triple lock. And the triple lock is really important for every pensioner, because that is the increase year on year. As I say, £900
we've only got a
next
couple of minutes left, and people will notice you have not said sorry for making a difficult choice. You had the opportunity to, but you haven't said sorry for making what is, people acknowledge, a difficult choice. So let me move on. Chrissy said, I'd like some free gifts, Keir. I'd love to get all this stuff. They're just as bad as the Conservatives. I've been let down. Do you accept people think that the freebies, so-called, paid for by donors who presumably think they're going to get some kind of influence or access in return, makes you look out of touch?
Well, let me just deal with that, because obviously in the busy period running up to the election, lots of people were helping the Labour Party, and some made offers of gifts towards clothing, etc. We're very tied up at that stage, and therefore I took donations towards clothing. Now, that was in opposition. We were busy working flat out on the election. Obviously, we're in government now, and you won't be seeing declarations like that from me in future. So that's the long and the short of it.
No more donations for clothes?
No.
Donations for hospitality, donations for concerts?
Well, let me just give you the example, because in relation to my particular donations, quite a lot relate to football matches. Now,
OK, people understand that
well,
you feel safer.
I'm not sure everybody
you
is...
feel safer in hospitality. What about
just let me...
Premier League donating tickets to go and see Taylor Swift?
Well, let me just explain, because you're putting this to me, and I think it is important. I've got season tickets at Arsenal. I've had them for a very long time, and I go with my boy who's 60. For security reasons, not my choice, but both the club and the security do not think that I can be in the stands anymore where my tickets are paid for. So the club have said, well, in which case, you can be our guest in the director's box. Other clubs have done the same. Crystal Palace, for example, invited me to go in the director's box. Arsenal have done that. Now, that's not a ticket you can buy. You can't pay for it. It's the club saying, be our guest, because otherwise you won't be able to go to the game. And that means I can go to the game to see Arsenal.
So you're not ruling
that
out. What about free tickets to gigs?
I think that's a matter of judgment, I think, for every MP. There has to be a good reason. They'll exercise their judgment. Of course, they'll then have to record it in accordance with the rules, as you would expect.
OK. And finally, you're about to be in America, in New York. We spend $3 billion on Ukraine, $8 billion on foreign aid. What do you say to those who say, spend that money at home?
I understand that argument, but I think in relation to, let's say, Ukraine, we have to understand that that war in Ukraine is not just about Ukraine. It's about Russian aggression. It's about our freedom, our democracy, the way we're able to exercise our rights in this country. It is the frontier of freedom. And so it's really important that we stand with Ukraine. That's why there's been pretty well political unity on this from the start. Yes, of course, Russia has invaded Ukraine, so it's about Ukrainian sovereignty, but it is also about our freedom, our democracy, and our rights and freedoms in this country, and I think everybody would accept.
And any
but in
cuts
circumstances
to
like
foreign
that,
aid?
well, of course, every decision has to be carefully taken. But we have been resolute, and I'm proud that we've been resolute in this country for our support for Ukraine. I'm proud that across the country, people have opened their homes to refugees from Ukraine who've suffered from Russian aggression. I think that's who we are as a country. But it also matters, because if Russian aggression is seen to benefit and succeed, that is an issue of deep concern to the United Kingdom.
OK. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Prime Minister, it's good to see you. And I wonder, just in a yes or no, are you keeping the single-person council tax discount?
Look, I'm not going to make decisions before the election, before the budget, so we'll see that in the budget.
OK. Thank you.
That's fascinating, Susanna, because you could almost see the fort that he was sitting inside, surrounded by defensive moats and defensive ditches and spikes. He was right in there. And I think that for him was a wasted opportunity. Why couldn't he simply say, look, of course I apologise to pensioners for what I'm having to do, but I have no alternative. But of course I'm sorry. Why couldn't he just talk like a human being?